dear beloved Indonesia, it's time to stop and take a break, to distance ourselves for a while and hope for a better future. We are longing to hear the sounds of the waves and to see the beauty that awaits around every corner of this land. Our beautiful motherland, the time will come when the sky will again shine bright and we'll come back stronger.
And good morning and afternoon for everyone all over the world. My name is Daliana, and I'm representing the Liveable Cities Indonesian Diaspora Network. And I welcome you all today. Thank you for joining us, and especially to our speakers, Ibu Silvia Halim and Neil Walmsley, to our moderator, Florian Heinzelmann, and our commentators, Pak Tiyok Prasetyoadi and Pak Widoyoko. Welcome every participant. Thank you very much. I'm going to now share this opening document. Just a second. Yes, I hope everybody can view the screen right now. Welcome to Mobility for All, the second webinar of Livable Cities. Here we would like to especially thank our sponsors, the Ministry of Tourism and Creative Economy of Indonesia, Propan, ATEJA, and IDN, the Netherlands. The Livable Cities is a platform that we have in the Netherlands as a part of Indonesian Diaspora Network. And we take a positive approach toward a lot of issues of urban design, architecture, urban planning, infrastructure planning. And we believe that good pilots and best practices could be very useful for the future of our cities. There are 3 door prizes today for the Q&A for the 3 best questions. There are 2 books. One is Desain Bandara Nusantara Alor. The other one is Collaborative Innovation. Those 2 books are from Propan. Thank you, PT Propan Raya. As well as there is 1 book donated by PDW, which is Beyond Building. They're all very nice books, and I hope you will give your best questions for today. And there is a little bit of a note that the organizers have to mention. And that is, if you're not speaking, please keep the microphone muted. That would be very helpful. As well as we are recording this presentation and the Zoom meeting. So if you do mind the recording, please just turn your video off. But we hope that we have informed you that we are doing this recording and this will be uploaded to YouTube later on. And during the webinar, if you can, please do not forget to fill in the presence list, and the link is in the chat box. And now, I have now the opportunity to give the floor to our moderator, Bandung's and Bavaria's very own local. His name is Dr. Florian Heinzelmann, Director of SHAU and Senior Visiting Fellow at the Department of Architecture, National University of Singapore. Florian, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Daliana, for introducing me. Welcome everybody to our webinar with the topic Mobility for All. Jakartans spend 400 hours a year in traffic. The lack of widely accessible and comfortable public transportation, rapid urbanization and growth of suburban areas in the metropolitan region of Jakarta, not unlike other megacities in the world, is resulting in long time spent for commuting. This is due to the common use of individual motorized vehicles, thus hours spent in traffic jams, resulting in lack of family time, increased pollution. After all, nobody turns off their engines due to the need for air conditioning. And subsequently, lower quality of life for everybody. Proper public transport such as MRT, which started running in 2019, has given a new hope. Departing from Jakarta and looking at other cities such as Dubai and Singapore, this webinar would like to discuss the central question: designing and managing public transport cities to 24. Now, I would like to introduce to you our speakers and commentators for today. Just a second. So, first of all, first speaker, I would like to welcome Silvia Halim, working for PT MRT Jakarta, one of our speakers. Silvia Halim graduated from the Nanyang Technological University School of Civil and Environmental Engineering in 2004. She was with the Land Transport Authority of Singapore for 12 years, where she has built her career and honed her skills in project management for land transport infrastructure projects. As the construction director of PT MRT Jakarta since 2016, Silvia Halim is responsible for the planning, design, and construction of the MRT system in Jakarta. PT MRT Jakarta successfully delivered the first MRT in Indonesia on the 24th of March in 2019. As our next speaker, I would like to welcome Neil Walmsley from ARUP Singapore. He is an advisory, planning and design leader for ARUP Singapore. He joined ARUP in 1997 and has previously worked in the UK and Middle East. He is currently based in Singapore and leads the planning business there. Prior to this, he was the Middle East planning leader based in Dubai, where he led a wide range of large and influential planning projects, including the Abu Dhabi 2030 Master Plan, Dubai's 2020 Transport Master Plan, Dubai's successful bid to host World Expo in 2020, and a wide range of large-scale development master plans. I would like to further welcome our commentators. First of all, Tiyok Prasetyoadi. He is the managing director of PDW, which he established in 2003 with Professor Dr. Muhammad Danisworo. He graduated with a Bachelor of Engineering in Architecture from Bandung Institute of Technology in 1995. After an internship at Cox Architects in Sydney, Australia, he continued his study at the University of New South Wales, Sydney, and earned a Master of Urban Development and Design degree in 1998. Tiyok is also Director of External Relations at the Green Building Council Indonesia and Country Representative of Council on Tall Building and Urban Habitat. Last but not least, I would like to welcome Widoyoko, Chairman Indonesia Transportation Forum, ITF, Representative PT Inca in the Netherlands. He graduated as Master of Science in Aerospace Engineering from Delft University of Technology. Then he worked as design engineer at Indonesian Aircraft Industry and project manager at PT in Rail Indonesia. Since 2007, he has lived in Amsterdam as a representative of PT Inca, Indonesian railway industry. He is also active in organizations such as Chairman of Indonesia Transportation Forum, member of Indonesia Railway Society, Indonesia Railway Heritage, and Indonesia Diaspora. So thank you very much for you to join. And here you have a short event rundown. Basically, the introduction already has happened. So we will have now 20 minutes presentation from our keynote speakers each, and then a 5 minutes reflection from the commenters to both of the speakers. After that, we will have 20 minutes parallel group discussions in our breakout rooms. Then 20 minutes of reflection of what happened in these discussions. Then a 20-minute question and answer session from everybody towards our speakers and topics as such. And then a conclusion from my side, and then closing comments by the committee. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Silvia Halim. Please start with your presentation.
Hi, thank you, Florian, for the introductions. Good evening, everyone from Jakarta. And I'm very thankful for these invitations and this opportunity given for me to share what we have been doing here in Jakarta. And I'll just start quickly by sharing with you a quick reminder of how challenging is commuting in Jakarta. Okay. So so what we have in Jakarta is this. We have a traffic congestions problem. It's 100 trillion rupiah a year in lost productivity kind of problems. Only 32% mode share of public transportation to date in Jakarta and Greater Jakarta. So we are in dire need, and it's paramount for us to have a sustainable mass transportation system in Jakarta. And so MRT Jakarta was incorporated with 3 main tasks. First is to construct the infrastructure. Secondly, we operate and we maintain. And thirdly, we also look into the business development aspect that includes the transit-oriented development. And so after many years of planning and struggles in the constructions, we finally completed the first MRT in Jakarta, Indonesia. It's a 16-kilometer line spanning from the southern of Jakarta, Lebak Bulus, all the way to the center of Jakarta, Bundaran HI. And we completed and we started operations on 24th March 2019. And since then, we have served approximately 33 million riderships of passengers to date. And we are happy to share and that we were able to complete and operate so far with 0 fatality, on budget pretty much, quality that we have expected, and on time, or maybe I could say about time. So since we operate in March 2019, we have been able to serve all different level society member with the same international standard, where we have been able to maintain our punctuality at 99.8%. And we also provide barrier-free access for all our commuters who has special needs. Well, probably we are not perfect and we are still rooms for improvements, but for whatever that we are lack with our facilities, we make it up with the services that we can provide for our commuter. And of course, MRT Jakarta is for gender equality by providing safe and convenient facilities and services for women in commuting, such as a special train for women during peak hours, nursing room, as well as priority pinned for pregnant passengers and elderly passengers. Now, one of the most frequently questions that we get as we prepare ourselves to complete and operate the MRT Jakarta was that how are we going to ensure the behavior of our passengers? How are we going to ensure the cleanliness in the station since we are able to deliver such a nice infrastructures? And for that, we did intentional efforts to do public campaign where we share to the publics about being courteous in the public transportations, about maintaining the cleanliness and protect the infrastructure together, and also about sharing public spaces. And we are glad to see that there have been transformations of cultures and lifestyles happening in our stations as well as the surrounding areas. You know, people, we can see people are now, embracing biking and cycling to and from the stations, as well as walking to the stations or from the stations. Now, we also knew that the presence of such mass transportation system will trigger changes to the areas surrounding the stations or to the districts surroundings. And so we looked into transit-oriented developments ever since before we completed the MRT Jakarta while we were still in constructions. And we did a lot of studies, we did a lot of benchmarks to the various cities and operators in the regions. We also engaged consultants, professionals, experience in this area, such as ARUP, like Neil himself, as well as Pak Tiyok from PDW, to help us to look into the TOD that we should be having for MRT Jakarta. You know, basically, we want to make sure that we have the correct understanding about TOD, that we can design the best possible TOD for MRT Jakarta, and of course, finding the suitable scheme that we can implement. And so, also after years of planning, we are now finally at the implementation stage. The government has rolled out, issued several regulations that serves as our reference, has our guides, and as an umbrella for us to implement the TOD in the MRT Jakarta. And we have been appointed as the TOD operators and managers for the first 5 locations, which are Lebak Bulus, Fatmawati, Blok M, Sisingamangaraja, Istora Senayan, and Duku Atas. And what does that mean for us to be TOD managers and operators? That means that we are to prepare the urban design guidelines for each of the TOD locations, and then we manages and operates the TOD area, and of course, the ability to commercialize and gain revenue from that, but also to carry out public service through the delivery of public infrastructures and affordable housing in the TOD area. And so to execute the mandate that we have gotten from the government, we have formed a subsidiary with Transjakarta, which is another operator for BRT, a company that is called Integrasi Transit Jakarta, or ITJ. So what ITJ will do is that it will serve as the main coordination point between the government, the provincial government of Jakarta and MRT Jakarta with the various stakeholders, such as the developers, the investors, the landowners, and also the public. ITJ will basically manages the developments in the TOD area, as well as ensuring the delivery of those public infrastructures and affordable housing. Now, we also understand that one of the key success factor for these implementations is to have trust, to gain trust from our stakeholders. And to do that, that means we have to be transparent and be accountable in our implementations. And so one of the first things that we are doing, currently together with the support of PDW is that we are conducting series of webinar where we are sharing with all the stakeholders on the mechanism, the procedures, and the plan of the TOD and how we intend to implement it, so that everybody will have the same level of understanding about the TOD implementations. So these are some of the examples, the changes, the transformation that's already taking place in Jakarta. The surrounding the MRT stations along the corridors of MRT, such as the revitalizations of sidewalks, and also the creations of public plaza and pedestrianizations of areas for people to gather and commute in a better way. And this is also some of the impending projects, such as the building of interconnections, and also facilities like pedestrian decks in 2 locations of TOD. So now we already have the MRT, we already have the BRT, LRT, buses, online transportations. So what's next, And we understand that in order to have more people to be attracted, enjoying public transportation, to switch from their private cars to public transportations, besides availability and accessibility, is to have it to be well integrated, an integrated public transportation network and services. And so in January this year, we established a joint venture, MRT Jakarta representing the provincial government of DKI Jakarta, formed a joint venture with PT KAI, Kereta Api Indonesia, a state-owned enterprise representing the central governments. So both mass transportation companies jointly to produce a company called MITJ. MITJ will be executing strategic initiatives in integrating transportation in Jakarta and Greater Jakarta, but also to look into the TOD surrounding the stations of PT KAI. And secondly, in August this year, all the transport operators has agreed together to form a joint venture as well that will look into the integrated electronic fare collections system. So we are looking at an integrated ticketing system among all transport operators. The aim is that not just a seamless payment system for all the commuters, but also to have consolidated data of public transportations. And eventually what we are aiming for is that a targeted PSO or subsidy scheme for the Jakarta and Greater Jakarta. And one of the quick actions or quick wins, we call it, to demonstrate that such collaboration can actually happen among operators is where together MRT, PT KAI, and their subsidiary PT KCI atau KCI, as well as the provincial government of Jakarta, we revitalize the areas surrounding the stations of PT KCI, such as Tanah Abang, Senen, Sudirman, Juanda, and then coming soon, Gondangdia, Manggarai, Palmera, Kota, and Tebet. These are the notorious stations in Jakarta that are known with the messiness surrounding the stations, and also in dire need of revitalizations. And so this is currently what we are doing, and hopefully we will continue to do more with the other stations in Jakarta and Greater Jakarta. So as you can see, there have been so many progress and transformations that are taking place since the completions of MRT Jakarta in March 2019. And therefore, we are looking forward the expansions of a network, MRT network in Jakarta and Greater Jakarta. And what we see here is a master plan of network that was developed by JUTP 2, which stands for Jabodetabek or Greater Jakarta Urban Transportations Policy Integrations. It was a study that was commissioned by the Office of Coordinating Economic Minister in cooperation with the Japan International Cooperation Agency, or what we call it JICA. While this is the master plan that we are having or produced by JUTP, the provisional government of Jakarta is also currently developing the master plan for the transportations in Jakarta itself. And these are the lines that are currently in the pipeline with MRT Jakarta. So what we see here is that we already have in the blue line, which is the north-south line, the first half, which is at the southern path, has been completed. We call it phase 1. We will be continuing to the northern part, and that's what we call phase 2, which is a continuation from Bundaran Hi all the way to Ancol Barat. And then we will be looking into the phase 3, an east-west line from Kalideres to Ujung Menteng. And also currently we are doing a feasibility study at the southern part, continuing from Fatmawati to Taman Mini. So these are something that we are now working on, and we are very excited. We hope that we will be able to share more the progress of these impending lines with the public in next years. And with that, I end my presentations. I look forward to hear from Neil and from our commentators, and as well as the discussion during the Q&A. Back to you, Florian.
Thank you very much, Ibu Silvia. Great presentation, and I'm looking forward to what the commentators and the audience have to say to it. And now I would like to invite Neil. The stage is yours. Please go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you, Florian. Just checking, can you see the screen?
Fantastic, wonderful. Everything is there.
Everything's there. Awesome. Thank you. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining. And thank you to Silvia for your presentation as well. It's a pleasure to be here on a Friday evening, a bit unusual for me, but great to be here. So my presentation is going to be almost like watching a film. There's going to be a lot of slides in a very short period of time, but I'm going to cover the broad theme of mobility for all, inclusivity in our urban transit systems, with reference to a few different case studies and hopefully places that many of you will recognize along the way. But what I want to start with is to just remind us why do cities exist? Cities exist because they're competing. They're competing with each other for investment. They're competing with each other for talent, to retain talent, to attract talent, and so on. And so if we think of cities in that context, how do they do that? They do that by trying to create a quality of life for their citizens, and a quality of life that might even attract other people to want to be there. And that's often measured by these kind of global ranking indices from Mercer, from The Economist, and others. And cities are now very savvy at marketing themselves internationally because of their ranking scores. And Vienna, Zurich, Melbourne, Sydney, all have been known to hit the media with the stories of their success. And many cities also around the world are now concentrating on getting their ranking scores improved because they want to be on the headlines too. But the interesting question is it easy to jump up those rankings? And the answer, frankly, is it's not. And the reason it's not is because cities are very complicated. Lots of different pieces, and they're all interconnected. It's not like you can predict exactly what's going to happen in one part of the city by what you do in another part of the city, or in one system, what you might do and how that might affect other systems. All different parts of the city are affected and interacting in many different ways. But if we think about this idea of quality of life, this is what the European Commission thinks quality of life might be defined by. Again, a broad range of different things, all different, or some time-based, some fixed, but a very broad and diverse range of agendas, from access to health, the quality of natural environment, the governance, education systems, and so on. And all of that has to be considered in the context of cost. How much does it cost to be able to choose to live in a place that you want to live and to be able to enjoy all of the things that place offers? And quite often people choose cities or have a perception of cities based on brand. What's that brand based on? It's generally based on what they've read, what they've heard, what they've seen. And one of the things that will dictate what they read, hear, and see is the social conscience of the city. Does the city get positive media coverage? Does it treat its people well? And so it comes right back to inclusivity. Now, if we take away from what cities are doing for a moment, what's happening on a more strategic level? The world is being pushed by external factors towards aspiring against the UN SDGs, the Sustainable Urban Development Goals. And 3 of them are very directly, explicitly focused on addressing inequalities in society. In addition, at least, and probably more, but at least another 5 have very clear, in their secondary tier, in the targets, have very clear links to equality or inequality in terms of what they're trying to achieve. So this webinar is very well targeted at the role of transport in addressing inequalities. And transport can address inequality in many different ways, thinking about fairness in terms of race, age, class, gender, income, health, or disabilities. And I often think of the bridges in Jakarta to get to the Transjakarta network, and steep steps over bridges make it impossible for some people to access. And that's a criticism of the existing infrastructure, but it's not something that Jakarta is unaware of. It's something that's in process to be improved upon. But it's also, there's the thing about, it's not just about the direct fairness, it's also about accessibility in terms of choice. Do people have the choice to live where they live, work where they work, and use systems that allow them to access opportunities? Can they afford to? Do they have enough time to? And can they rely on those systems? And there's a concept of spatial mismatch. It's quite, in many cities around the world, low-income jobs are located on the edge of the city. Low-income residents tended to live in more towards the center. And transport services tended to work in the wrong direction for those. So there was this concept of spatial mismatch. More fundamentally, from an equity point of view, are resources being distributed in a way that's most appropriate to the people with the most need? So as a context, that's a bit of background. What I want to jump into now is a bit of history. And this is a city in Turkey called Mardin. And Mardin didn't have any cars because it was way before the internal combustion engine, but everybody could access everything they needed to get to because it was all within walking distance. Yeah, the basic fundamentals of Mardin was the distance people would be happy to walk. If you fast forward to around the year 1900, late 1890s, very common view, this is Sydney, people who had money also had access to horse-drawn carriages. They could travel further because they could afford to. And go into the 1908, New York City, the first mass-produced vehicles, again, accessible to the people who could afford to have them. Initially, very exclusive, and over time, as we all know today, more and more accessible to more and more people, but still not ubiquitous. This is 1930s, and Le Corbusier, and you can see the city concepts that he was talking about had lots of space allocated to people moving around on foot, not constrained by cars because the cars are in a different plane, one level below. Let's look at this in 1930s. And this is London in the 1960s. And you see the cars are on the same plane as the people. And therefore, if the people want to cross the road, they have to find a way to get across without interacting with the cars, traffic signals, zebra crossings, and so on. This document was published around the same time, 1963, and it basically said if we keep designing our cities around cars, we'll end up with places we don't like, places that as humans are not nice places to be. And lots of cities in the world understood that message early and acted upon it. Lots of cities in the world didn't. This is Los Angeles, and you can see at the front of the image there, there's a 10-lane highway, which is a huge scar through the urban landscape. And there's a real kind of sprawling mass of city. And anyone who's been to LA, it's literally from the sea to the mountains, continuous development with no real natural shape or identity to it. But Los Angeles got their head around this. And in 2016, they committed to a major long-term investment in addressing their current form of car-dependent city. But there are still many cities around the world, and you'll recognize this one, that are still struggling to move away from car dependency. This is an interesting image because actually the motorbikes there, some people perceive to be the problem. The motorbikes are a response to the problem and probably part of the solution. I'll talk a bit later about technology. I'll come back to that. This image is a photograph of lots of people doing nothing economically valuable. They are all traveling somewhere and spending their time, and Florian touched on some statistics earlier, spending their time traveling. Yeah, it's not an economically effective use. What is good here is that the infrastructure is being well used. The entire infrastructure is in good use. On this image, only half the infrastructure is in good use. So we not only have people wasting their time, we also have lots of infrastructure that's not being used. And on this image, there are no people. There's just some very valuable land in the middle of a city covered in storage, which isn't a great use of land either. So all of these things revolve around dependence on cars. Car dependency is also the highest cause of death in young men around the world in the age group of 16 to 30. And some of you will recognize Kuala Lumpur here. Not just Kuala Lumpur, many cities around the world have major air quality issues and consequences of that in terms of health of citizens. There is a very clearly proven link between the energy consumed in cities and how dense those cities are conceived. And that has also a direct link to the types of transport modes that people choose. However, of all of the things I've said about cars, this graph demonstrates that as the wealth of society has evolved, the desire to purchase your own car has gone up. The lowest horizontal line, Hong Kong and Singapore, they have managed to constrain that growth. The highest, the most steep line, Malaysia, extremely steep growth. But on every single case here, as wealth has gone up, so has desire to own cars. And here's an image of a chap who's delighted he's just bought himself a car. And I like to compare this to the concept of an all-inclusive buffet. Once you've paid for the buffet, you will keep eating until you can't eat anymore. Once you've paid for the car, you will choose to drive it every time you can because you've paid the money and you want to make use of the asset. Why is that a problem? So if you look at this diagram, you can see that a car in mixed traffic has the least efficient use of road space for movement. At the other extreme, suburban railways, and somewhere in between, cyclists and pedestrians. So using a car, if everyone chooses to use a car, we need more space to move the same amount of people to move between the things they want to do. And this cartoon, which I've stolen from the internet, illustrates the mindset problem we have. People see that the world is dominated by cars and therefore they choose to travel by car because they don't see any other option. Yeah, people choosing to take their kid to school because there's too many cars. And then there's this concept of, well, let's widen the roads because we widen the roads and everything will be okay. But actually, when we widen the roads, we just create the same problem about 4 meters wider in each direction. And this cartoon illustrates how we are not equitably sharing the space. The people waiting for the bus are squashing, the people on the cycle are squashing, the people in the public transport system are squashed, and the gentleman in the car is very comfortable. There's an analogy of the shopping trolley. He's gone into the supermarket and he's picked up 4 shopping trolleys And he's going to walk around the supermarket with 4 shopping trolleys, even though he only needs 1. And the analogy being the number of seats he has in his car. This is what it feels like to be a pedestrian. Yeah, you are pushed to the edges and you can't cross the big canyon of the road corridor. And actually the wooden planks, these only appear every 2 or 3 minutes for 30 seconds. So it's not just that the space is constrained, it's also that the crossing of the space is time constrained as well. Putting all of what I've talked about so far together, we come back to this concept of urban poverty. People who do not have access to opportunities because they are not able to afford their own private vehicle in cities that have not made provision for them in other ways, have limited access to jobs, limited access to skills development training, limited access to income growth, poor quality housing, higher crime issues, more likely to have health issues. So in an ultimate society way, the people who lead our cities, they're trying to compete against each other. The cities that are not accommodating non-car users are encouraging urban poverty. So what are we going to do about it? 3 key themes: efficient urban mass transit, land use transport integration, last mile connectivity. And Silvia has talked about all of these without even saying those words, because Jakarta is a fantastic example and MRTJ is a fantastic example of bringing together land use, last mile, and mass transit. So what does Singapore do? Singapore has a comprehensive plan for their MRT system. They also have very clear stated objectives. They want 80% of the population to live within 10 minutes walk, keyword, of an MRT station within 10 years. And so Singapore is knocking out 1 or 2 new lines every 10 to 12 year cycle. Significant major investment in urban mass transit, which means buying lots of trains, and it means buying lots of transit infrastructure. But none of that does anything unless you integrate it. So you can see here an interchange that integrates rail, bus, highway network, and significant urban development. Exactly the kind of principles that Silvia was talking about earlier. In addition, Singapore government has got a commitment to making Singapore a 45-minute city. You can get anywhere you need to by walk, cycle, or transit in 45 minutes, and that people should live within 20-minute towns. You should be able to do anything you want to do in the terms of everyday functions within your 20-minute town. And I'll come back to that in a moment. Second theme, land use and transport integration. Singapore's model has been developed over a long period with a lot of deep planning. And the diagram on the right is known as the constellation map. It shows the 4 key outer hubs: Jurong, Woodlands, Tampines, and the central area. And then the inner ring, Buena Vista, round to Paya Lebar. And that is the structure of the city at a strategic planning level. This is the scale of the new capital, the IKN city. There is also then at each node, the concept of a compact city. So jobs, accommodation, and things that people do, including education, are all contained together in those satellite districts. So, and they're contained in a way that should be walkable and cyclable, not that you have to drive between one land use and another. So that's integrated land use at a district scale. And then the next level down, maybe Silvia talked very specifically about transit-oriented development. That's integration of transit and land uses at a precinct level. And you can see the very simple example here. Why is this all relevant? Because evidence from all around the world shows that if you have access to public transport to get from areas of low income to areas of employment opportunity, then people will make use of that facility and your city will be better for it. An example of that, and this is an example with some flaws I'll come on to, is Vancouver. Vancouver today has one of the highest land values in the world. And one of the reasons for that is that they committed to a policy of not encouraging mass highway systems into the core. They increased the downtown population, they increased the downtown employment, and they reduced the downtown car vehicle access through very targeted land use and transport planning initiatives. Really impressive story. The problem with all of that is that Vancouver downtown now is not affordable for people without significant high incomes. The third theme, and I think what I'll dwell on for a moment longer, is last mile connectivity. And last mile could mean last 100 meters, last 400 meters, last 800 meters, but generally last mile. And I think this phrase is fantastic. Get walkability right, and so much of the rest will follow. And I talked earlier about the efficient use of space, walking, very efficient use of space. Here's an example, cycling, 10 cycles to 1 car that typically only carries 1 or 2 people. So you'll get a 5-to-1 ratio at worst, cycling versus cars. And so many of you will have seen before this kind of diagram. This is from Copenhagen, but it's being used in many cities around the world. The hierarchy of transport users, where walking, cycling, and utility are more important in the mindset of planning of cities. And some of the work that Silvia talked about was about improving walkability to the MRT stations. We had a hand in some of that, and it was an absolute pleasure to be involved. This image is, I think, really interesting. This is a load of children being taught from an early age that walking is a good way to get to school. And because they're all walking together, there's a social value, there's a community value, there's an environmental value, and there's a long-term mindset that says walking is good for you. So the idea of a walking bus, fantastic. You'll also find places around the world where they have a cycle bus, where people all converge in one place and ride a group cycle together. ARUP, and I don't want to spend all evening plugging ARUP, but we have done a lot of research on walking and the walking world. This is available on the website, free access for anyone who's interested. It explores essentially actions in the context of the things that need to happen to make the world a better place from a walking perspective. We've also looked more locally with my team at walkability in the tropics, considering the very specific needs of the tropics. And we've developed this tool, which is the walkability wheel, to allow us to really deeply understand all of the different factors that influence walkability in cities and how cities can see that comparison between each other because cities are all competing together. London talks about walking as a health strategy. They do not call it a transport strategy. They call it a health strategy. And that's really interesting because people don't like to be told how to do transport, but people do like to know that they're doing things that keep them healthy. And these posters appeared on the London Underground. There is nothing in here about where you're going from and where you're going to. It's all about the mindset of walking is a good thing to do. Talking a little about Singapore, the Singapore mantra, walk, cycle, ride. And this is the Singapore logic for encouraging people to make sustainable transport choices. To do this, some of the interventions are very unattractive, unsexy, pretty simple things. 200 kilometers of sheltered walkways. The image at the top is not, look at my city. It's a very pragmatic, cost-effective shelter that prevents people from choosing to use a car because it might rain. Simple as that. And the one at the bottom, you can see right from the front door of a development, a property, right to the bus stop, entire cover all the way. There's also a big push now in Singapore on cycling. I'd say that the focus right now is around cycling at the town scale, not at the city scale. But there is definitely a push towards encouraging people to cycle. Briefly touching on Dubai, those of you who will have been to Dubai, the image is not a poor quality image. It's simply that the air quality was poor when the image was taken. This is what Dubai looked like 20 years ago, 15 years ago, when I was first there. And still today, you would see the same queues. However, in the last 15 years, Dubai has spent a lot of money on 2 new metro lines, MRT lines, covering the entirety of what was the pre-existing urban area. And interestingly, and this is a station here, all retrofitted within the existing urban area. This gold shape is the station, and the line that goes left to right is the train line. You can see the train just leaving the station. The line that goes from bottom to top is a walkway. And it's a walkway that goes almost a kilometer into the Dubai Mall project. In the winter, it's very nice to walk in Dubai. In the summer, it is too hot to walk 800 meters in direct sunlight outdoors. This link has completely changed the way that people choose to arrive at the Dubai Mall, one of the world's biggest and most attractive shopping destinations. ARUP was heavily involved in the Pedways development strategy, which didn't just look at where can we put links, but also how can we pay for them. There is no magic money tree. We have to find ways to generate revenue through these infrastructure investments. And it doesn't have to be air conditioned. There are lots of different ways to cool the environment. And our current work on the new capital city with Bapenas is looking at how do we develop a microclimate that makes it possible to walk more in the East Kalimantan context. Very quickly on New York, Janet Sadiq-Khan was the commissioner for New York's transport systems for, I think, 2007 to 2012. And she said that she truly believes if you change the street, you can change the world. What did she mean by that? She changed Times Square from a constrained road with cars on both sides to one of the most popular pedestrianized destinations in the world. This was part of a 35-year plan from 1980 right up to 2015, fundamental change in how people move in New York. Protected cycle lanes is a big part of that, not just cycle lanes, not just paint on the road, but protected cycle lanes. And what you can see from this diagram is that New York has had a, not just more impact, but a higher proportional impact in how people's behavior has changed. Just coming up to a wrap up, and I want to just dispel some myths about technology. Technology will not solve all of our urban transport problems. By making these vehicles talk to each other, it won't take away many of the problems I talked about earlier. This is a street full of 50 people in 50 cars. This is 50 people sitting on chairs, and this is 50 people in a bus. We just made a load of space that has value for the city. But this image, okay, it's an old image, but this image could easily be electric vehicles, could easily be rideshare vehicles, could easily be automated vehicles. They still fill that space with people that are traveling. So yes, there is a role for e-vehicles. Yes, there is a role for rideshare. Yes, there is a role for automated vehicles. It is not the silver bullet, the magical solution to everything. These are single person pods, and these do have a role, I think. They're much more efficient. They have a much smaller footprint. These are also essentially single person pods, cycles and scooters. And because of technology, we can call them whenever we want them. We know when they're coming. We can have a much more reliable transport system. However, I think COVID has shown me that the biggest single intervention for making cities more universally accessible is actually good quality internet connection, because increasingly people can work from home if they can connect from home. So with that, just to summarize, 4 key points: efficient mass transit, transit land use integration, last mile connectivity. And I'll leave you with my favorite quote. And I think every city should be aspiring to be a city where people choose to ride public transport, because actually it's the naturally logical way to get around. So with that, I'll hand you back. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Neil, for this inspiring presentation. Indeed, you touched a lot of topics. It was like almost like having a complete master degree in urban transportation in 20 minutes. Fantastic. Thank you very much. So I would like to hand over now the stage to Silvia or Neil, in whatever form you deem the way you would like to do it. So please go ahead.
Thank you, Florian. Good evening and good afternoon in Holland, and good morning somewhere else. But yeah, I see that mobility for all is opportunities for everybody. It will create affordability. It was mentioned in both presentation, I think, although there's also debate with it, discussion with it, whether Indonesian income, the ticket will be too expensive. But this then can lead to further discussion. It will be interesting in the discussion later. But we also have to think about affordability, not only for the ticketing, but also that people can afford to live comfortably, the lifestyle, my next point later, and they will have equal opportunities to get to work, to be with the family, with community, as mentioned by Florian in my CV, that I live in Sydney before, one of the livable cities, the most livable cities in the world. That after work I still can hang out with my friends, can go to community activities. Also, what is important that Neil also mentioned is the network. Neil and Bu Silvia both. How you create network. It's not enough just one line. You can see that even with one line, 3 to 13 station, MRT has created a huge impact. It was started as a, what do you call it, ride, recreation for people in Jakarta, even from the fringe of Jakarta. But more and more, it elevates to lunchtime ride. And then a lot of people now are looking for accommodation, offices around the MRT stations. And it will also, like I mentioned before, lifestyle. Fortunately, our office is very close to the Lebak Bulus, so it's very close to the station. So when we have meeting, we usually have doesn't have any options. We only have 2 options: ojek or cars or taxi, and it will like take 2 hours just to go to the meeting and back, let alone do some works. But with the MRT, we can reach anywhere within 30-45 minutes. It's not only good for the commuting, but also for businesses. And Neil also mentioned the challenge, the last mile. This is the latest slide by Neil Enrique Peñalosa. I have the privilege to work with him indirectly because he was an advisor for Governor Dan Sutioso when he implemented BRT. And up to now, still my favorite projects in the office that we do pedestrian sidewalk in Jakarta. That will that already been that's already been around for 16 years. People started appreciating sidewalk, and now a lot of sidewalk improvements has been done by current and previous governors, which also tackle the issue of the last mile. People start using bike, bringing bike to the MRT, but we also have to also remember that we have to have a more integrated planning. We have been fortunate enough to work with Bu Silvi with MRTJ as well as Neil, and now we are also working with Neil in IKN master plan, along with Bappenas team. That this something that we have to share the vision to the government and community to create more livable cities that very competitive. So how we share vision? Vision is there, leaders' vision. We as professional translate it into planning, and people like in the government or any other professionals, contractors, cities managers, they're going to have a big role in the implementation stage. So what I'm trying to say here is that from all this wonderful presentation for Bu Silvia and Neil, that we need to remember that there's a leader vision that's been shared through the generation. If we're talking about governors, it passed on, and then it's elevated to national government. With MITJ, it's a push from the national leaders to the governors, to the ministries, to create integrated transportation system. And we have to remember that we need to work with community, association, and professionals for that. And that to create towards a world-class city that we're going to showcase, whether in Jakarta or new cities in Kayan or other cities in Indonesia. This is saying from
really appreciating, for instance, sidewalks and the last.
you are not stuck in the traffic, but you are the traffic. So if I'm still in the car, I am the traffic. Thank you very much, Florian. Over to you.
Yeah, it seems like my internet connection is interrupted. I don't know. So if you didn't hear me, yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate very much your comments. Also in respect to the sidewalk, I find that very interesting because for me, for instance, as a Westerner coming from Europe, sidewalk is something very natural, something very everybody has it, nobody thinks about it. But you know, having been living in Indonesia for quite a while, I start to understand sort of the importance of the sidewalk, and I would like to hear later a little bit more, maybe about this idea of the last mile. And with that, I would like to invite now our last commentator, Widoyoko. Please, the stage is yours. Please, if you have a slide to share, go ahead. And looking forward to hear your comments. Thank you.
Hello? Is that everybody hear me?
Hello.
Yeah? Is that good? Okay. Okay, thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Florian. Yeah, I would like to comment for the presentation of Ibu Silvia. To ensure the mobility in a big city like Jakarta, it is important that the rail-based transportation system is adapted as a backbone of the public transportation system. Actually, Jakarta has already adapted the system with the introduction of electric tram in 1899 and the introduction of electric train system in like KRL in 1925. So before the war, Jakarta is already a modern city. Unfortunately, after the war, the transportation policy favored for the bus system, and the electric tram, tram listrik, or electric train was disappeared in the years 60. But now, thanks to Pak Jokowi, Jakarta has a modern MRT and LRT system. So thank you, Pak Jokowi. I'm very happy with this. I have tried the MRT Jakarta for several times. My family house is in Jakarta, South Jakarta, not far from station Haji Nawi. So I always use the MRT if I want to go to the downtown. In my opinion, MRT Jakarta is very modern. The rolling stock, the station, the infrastructure are very good and convenient and user-friendly. Every MRT station has a toilet, has a meditation room, and many securities that guides and take care of the passenger. Especially for the MRT stations, I think it is much better than in Amsterdam or Rotterdam or The Hague, because not every metro station in Amsterdam or Rotterdam has toilet, right, Ibu Wiwi? And no meditation room at all. In Amsterdam, sometimes it is difficult to find a toilet. So I cannot imagine if you really need to go to the toilets. And yeah, we are with Ibu Wiwi, with Ibu Daliana, we are in the task force Liveable City. So toilet and meditation room is very important. You know, the human consists of the body and soul. These two must be in balance. So yeah, meditation is also important. This meditation room you cannot find in the metro of Amsterdam or Rotterdam or in Europe. So I'm very proud with MRT Jakarta. It's far better than other city in Europe. And things to be improved for MRT Jakarta is first the connectivity with other transportation modes. For example, with busway and commuter train, or later with LRT. The LRT system is not yet finished, but maybe. But I see that the connection is still difficult. For example, in my experience, if you want to go to the busway system at the Block M station, you go out from the MRT station Block M, and yeah, you have a very far walking distance from the MRT station to the busway station. It's very inconvenient for elderly people or pregnant women. The walking distance and the walkway connecting the stations is mostly also uncovered. So in the rainy season, is yeah, you can get wet. Yeah, this the same example also with connection with train. Yeah, the train station, a commuter train or airport train. My experience, I want to go to the airport Soekarno-Hatta using the MRT and connecting to the airport train from Duku Atas to BNI City. I have many luggage, yeah. So it is very troublesome, very awkward. The walking distance is very far. So maybe you can improve it with such a moving walkway or travelator, like in the airport Soekarno-Hatta. Yeah, it's easier.
Yes, I totally agree. Unfortunately, your time is over. Okay. Thank you very much, Widoyoko, for your comments. I especially enjoyed that you reminded us that the transportation system is not only to bring people from A to B, but also should cater for some other human needs, which is beyond reaching a destination. So yes, thank you very much for your comment. And with that, I would like to invite everybody to these parallel group discussions where we have 4 breakout rooms, if I'm not mistaken, and you will be assigned and dropped in by our team. And then we have a discussion for 20 minutes. So see you in the group discussion. I will be in group number 1, Daliana in group discussion number 2, Vivi in 3, and Julia in number 4. So see you in a second. The questions. One of the first questions I had, if I noted down correctly, is there a plan to have MRT stations inside apartment buildings? Meaning, for Jakarta, and of course this question is for Ibu Silvia, meaning the connectivity from apartment directly into an MRT station rather than going into the street and walk around or taking other modes of transport. Is there anything planned like that? And of course, from my side, I would like to know if this is even feasible, because if you would have an apartment building with an MRT station, it probably would increase the value tremendously. And that, of course, is a little bit, I guess, against the idea of equality and accessibility for everybody. But maybe you could react towards that question.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll just answer it directly, yeah, Florian. Yes, the yes, question please, was the question was that have an interconnections directly from residential buildings to MRT station. The answer is obviously yes, very yes. And perhaps why we couldn't really see it as much in MRT phase 1 is because we have to admit that when we first started MRT phase 1, nobody believes that it will actually complete, that it will actually going to happen, you know. So the surrounding developments, you know, was not really coming forward with that, you know. But having said that, ever since we completed it, and we actually have a network plan that ARUP actually prepared for us, connections between stations and the surrounding developments has been used as a reference. We have been in discussions with a lot of buildings along the corridors and the surrounding stations of MRT, talking with us about building interconnections. Yeah, and in fact, there are several already completed. It's not residential, it's commercial building. like Block M Plaza, the direct connection has been completed and it's already in functions. And then currently we have with in Lebak Bulus, with the building called, development called Points. They'll be building a direct skywalk from their building, which is a mixed use, a residential and a commercial, directly to Lebak Bulus stations. And behind it also another developments for residentials already prepared a design, and we are talking also about interconnections. And there are many more. Yeah, they are coming and in discussion at the moment with MRT Jakarta. And what happened now is that for our next line, the extension line, like phase 2, we are already talking with the building's owners now as we started building, you know, and they have come forward to us talking seriously how they can connect, where they want to connect. And that is good. This is a good thing because this is what we want. We prefer that all these connections are being built concurrently together while the stations and the lines are being built. Yeah.
Florian, maybe I can jump in there because
yes, please go ahead.
The question kind of implied that the MRT had to go into the building, but actually the mindset has to be that the customer thinks that the entrance to the MRT is at the front door of their building.
Yes.
It's about perception, and the more you can make the spider's web of access to the station reach out into the surrounding development, the more you have a complete precinct, a complete district, and a complete transit-oriented development.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be the building that moves; it's the perception of the entry point.
Yeah.
Yeah, may I add some information because I heard from the old expert long time ago, maybe more than 60 years ago. Actually, the planning of Jakarta is like that. Is access from the high-rise building not landed, but because of the spatial planning in Jakarta at this moment become like existing now. So not easy for MRT to make a line like that. Yeah, I understand. Thank you.
Yeah, I understand. Is that a question?
Yeah, it seems like Florian might have lost his internet. Just wait a second, and probably the organizer could pop up some question then on the screen so that we could read other questions. Is that a good idea?
So wait, I think, do you hear me again? I think I'm back.
Yes,
So now another of these questions, let me check right now. So I think this is a question to everybody. So now what happened when the pandemic started is that each region and each location within Indonesia had, let's say, their own strategy, and some of the strategy was like limiting public transportation access there too, and the others were going the other way around and saying we need to increase the access to public transportation in order to stretch passengers thin. So there was a question about strategies for situations like COVID-19 for public spaces and public transportation. So what is your opinion towards that? And I open these questions, of course, to everybody, to Widoyoko, to Tiyok, and of course, Neil and Ibu Silvia. So please, if one of you would like to respond to it, it would be fantastic.
I don't mind saying a few words on that. There are two pieces to the pandemic situation. There's the current situation, which is in most cities around the world, that people are still taking precautionary action to avoid the risk of catching the virus. And given that transmission is a proximity thing, and transmission proximity in terms of the number of times you interact with a stranger, which increases your chances of, in theory, catching. Mass transit is, I think, generally accepted as being a place where there's higher transmission rates. What we've seen in some cities around the world, Sydney, for example, is that they've reduced the capacity of carriages by, I think, something like 2/3. So that if the normal capacity is 100, they're now allowing 33 or something like that. Don't quote me on the numbers. And it was interesting. I had conversations with colleagues in Sydney to see what Singapore was doing before Singapore said what they were going to do. And when Singapore announced, they said no social distancing constraints on mass transit. However, people should wear a mask and should not talk. And so Singapore's response was basically keep your mouth closed, keep it covered, and take away the medium that generates the transmission. Now, I think that's the first phase, and that's this kind of keep the city moving without increasing the risks. In the next phase, it's more, I think, an emotional response when people recognize that either there's a vaccine, therefore it's not a major issue, or that the virus has been put to one side through management structures, and Singapore appears to be very well on top of it right now. And then it's a case of giving people confidence. And so I not jokingly, very deliberately had a conversation with a colleague who runs the mass transit systems in Perth, Western Australia. And I said, you need to advertise health risk on transit as a contrast to health risk of other choices to travel. Because, for example, by using mass transit, you are giving yourself a daily walk at both ends. If you choose to drive, you're not exercising. What's the consequence of that? You're safer on a train than you are in a car. What's the consequence of that? So deliberately, the highway, the car industry advertises all of the positives. The public transport industry rarely pushes their competitors' negatives as an advertising campaign. And I think it's the right time for Ibu Silvia to advertise that you're safer on an MRT train in Jakarta than sitting in a car breathing in fumes on the road.
I think you raise a very, very valuable point there, and I would like to continue with what you have said. With one of the other questions, in order to make public transportation more comfortable, should you, on the other hand, limit in whatever way, and if so, what way would there be incentive for taking or using cars? And again, this is a question for everybody. So basically, increase the comfort of using an MRT, and sort of discourage people, maybe in harder measures, from using a car, to make more uncomfortable using a car is one of the questions.
To follow up on Neil's comment, actually, a lot of people infected with the drivers in the car. You know how Jakartans have drivers, and in a lot of occasions, it's actually it has to be studied, Bu Silvia.
Yes.
But it has some occasions, some high-rank officials are really infected by sitting in a car with the driver.
Yeah.
That will also getting worse if people are driving their own cars. But then I'm also sitting in the architecture review board of Jakarta. We try to, strangely enough, our opposition to reduce the parking as a sort of a disincentive is transportation department, because they have a standard of minimum parking requirement.
Yes.
We want to make it maximum, so to encourage people using public transport.
Yes, correct.
That's short questions, but then with MRT as enabler, we try to change the rules. Bu Silvia, please.
Yes, and yeah, firstly is that thank you, Neil. That is a very good idea. I will actually really talk to the board of directors to implement such strategy to advertise about this benefit of not using public transportation. And probably I'd like to add on a little bit more about just now about the COVID thing is that there was the thing about in Jakarta is that although at the moment that public transportation seems to be the mode that has been being avoided, you know, but the thing is that we still need public transportation. You know, we're not going to stop in the developing of the public transportation and in promoting the usage of public transportations. What we are facing now is that we are trying to gain the public confidence again by ensuring a safe and clean and reliable public transportation for them to use, even though in these current conditions and current situations. And of course, going forward, the fact that now we are building our new stations and new lines, we will be incorporating new features that probably will enable people to feel even safer, like more automated facilities, touchless facilities as well. That's something that we recognize the possible change of behavior of commuters in public transportation in the future. And the second questions about how to discourage people using private vehicles or disincentive. As Tiyok mentioned, is that now we are also working together with the transport department to look into and to push them rolling out the new policy of increasing the parking rates. Like Tiyok mentioned, is about now the regulation of the policy is coming in from a minimum fee, but we are pushing it to be a maximum fee. And also with the fact that we are now, with the presence of MRT and then we're developing TOD, there will be requirements for new developments to have a smaller ratio or a lesser portions of parking space. Yeah, so that will again to encourage people to use public transportation, and hopefully the plan for the electronic road pricings will eventually, kicks in and takes place to again further discourage the usage of private vehicles and cars in Jakarta.
Just a quick comment on the back of this. When Dubai Metro was built, one of the biggest shopping malls, I won't name it, could be embarrassing for them, they said to all of their customers, there will be some disruption while the Transport Authority builds a train, but don't worry, when the train's gone, we'll let you know. And they didn't embrace the train at all. They refused to get involved. They given the option to name the station of their project. They said, no, not interested, our customers will drive nice cars. 5 years after the MRT opened, the Dubai Metro opened, that developer put their name on the station and completely reproduced their mall to serve a much more mainstream demographic, because all of their customers had already gone somewhere else. They realized that the train gave them access to a market that was a more lucrative market for their property. Which changes the way the city works.
Yes. You're absolutely right, Neil, and that is actually happening with MRT Jakarta. I shall not name which mall is that. Yes, we had the same exact experience. A mall that rejects our presence because our commuter is not in their target demographic. But once we completed, let's just say that they are using our presence as a way for them to get more investment for developing their mall. So you're right, so it's the same. That's the change, the transformation is happening. Yeah.
I think what you both are just mentioning about the value or the increase of value or the decrease of value in terms of the shopping mall, there was a question from the audience, which is also going along these lines. And of course, you know, you have a MRT station and you increase the value of the real estate. Is there some mechanism within the city or within the MRT to sort of get something back of this value increasement in order to, you know, invest of the future? So do you get something back in form of, I mean, taxation is maybe the wrong word, but you know, you increase the value for some real estate developers. Can you get something back to improve the line and the network? Or is there a mechanism for that?
Yeah, probably I can answer that. For our case in MRT Jakarta is that we have actually implemented this interconnection fee scheme. Just now there was a question about building interconnections between MRT stations with the surrounding buildings. So in the schemes that we have developed at the moment is that we will charge the private developments a certain fee for the interconnections that they are requesting or their buildings. So that's one of it. Secondly, with that, the transit-oriented development scheme that I was talking about, the scheme that we are implementing is that is in such a way that if there's a new development coming into the district or the TOD areas, and then that developments will require an increase, what do you call that? There's a,
FAR.
Yes, okay, AFR, yeah, correct, GFR. So if allowed by the urban design guidelines, there will be a certain fee also being charged. And then that fee or that so-called like a penalty is actually will be transferred into the development of public infrastructures. So it's just like they have to give back. They have to give back to the developments of the districts or the areas, such as public spaces like plaza or pedestrian walkway or interconnections or whatever other public facilities, and including even affordable housing as a way of creating equality in the transit-oriented development areas. So these are some of the things that we are now implementing for the MRT Jakarta. For when it comes to the taxations, that is a different discussion, and we understand there's some difficulties of the way the governments are doing their tax. They have different schemes, so that is yet being implemented, but we do hope that the government will look into it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for this answer. Now I have a question to the organizers, because for me, it looks like we are at the end of our Q&A session, and I have to come to a conclusion. Am I correct, or do we have time for another question?
Yeah, actually, the organizers have put together some selected questions. So please, can we share that screen for Florian so he can see it here? What are these probably 3 selected questions that could be talked about? Probably started from, this is sorted, right, from the beginning? So I think
it is sorted already.
Yeah.
Okay, so we start
with these questions which have come in the chat. Thank you.
Okay, so question number 1 from Yevon Vichaksono. How to improve mobility if some city already sprawl and had no choice but to use the automobile? How to cope with the financing problem to solve a mobility problem in urban, in urban sprawl cities such as Jakarta, because it's too expensive and would need a lot of money to be spent to construct public transport such as MRT, LRT, bus, etc. So basically, yeah, Jakarta is a mega sprawl. It covers a huge area, and building MRT and LRT and bus lines all over the city is quite costly. Is there a way to solve the condition which we are currently facing and cannot change, actually? Please be my guest to answer.
Absolutely, there's a way. There's no overnight solution. You know, we have to be realistic. In a pre-existing city, change is slow and painful. and things tend to get worse before they get better. But you have to look at the whole city as a single system. One of my first slides was how complicated that is. And it may be that you solve a problem in one place by doing something different somewhere else. So looking at your land use strategies where people intensify their behavior, looking at your mix of land uses. So bringing, for example, more residents into the city, as Vancouver did. You change your travel patterns to ease the stress on your travel networks. Changing the allocation of space, so making congestion worse for car owners by giving more space to buses to make the bus network function more effectively. Changing the way you charge for things. There's a whole suite of things you can do, or if you really have to, you could always just move to a new piece of land in East Kalimantan and get some pretty good urban planners to help you to think about how to do it all over again.
Okay, thank you. Then I would go to the second question from Zavarendro to Ibu Silvia. So this is a tricky engineering question you're facing here. So I won't repeat every technical detail, but basically it boils down that Jakarta is sinking. In the north of Jakarta, you have issues of the flood, you have soft soil, and everything is difficult. So what's your idea to deal with the soft soil, the flood-prone areas in Jakarta if you build the MRT line up to the north towards the sea? What's your response to that one? How do you deal with that?
All right, so if I answer all of it, we're not going to be living from this section tonight. Well, actually, the question has been asked is something that we have been sharing as well, actually, to the public in Jakarta as we introduce the extensions to the north. And I think, firstly, of course, that when before we call for the tender and the constructions, we basically have our consultants, a group of experts, to look into all these challenges. And then for that, we develop a basic engineering design. We set a list of requirements that we have imposed to whoever the contractor is to look into and addressing all these concerns. We're basically, in terms of soft soil and land subsidence, we have asked the contractors to look into measures like ground improvements, and then looking into the design level of the stations, looking into what are the possibility or the record of the flood level in the surrounding areas, and of course flood protection systems to be in place. And during the construction itself, one of our major concerns is about the heritage buildings. And there's a lot of potential heritage objects during our constructions going to the north. So the concern would be that if there is any such object being found, potentially the project might be requested to stop. And that is actually a potential problems to the project itself. So one way of doing it is that our strategy is that we gather all the heritage buildings experts to be on board with us from the beginning of the projects, and we investigate as much as possible where potential heritage points are, and then we do what we call pre-construction investigations. So we identify as early as possible, and then if there's any objects found, then we have to make a quick decisions within a certain amount of time to decide whether we will have to leave it there, and then we have to redesign, or we can actually extract those objects and put it in a safe locations. So that is project management strategy-wise, you know. Other than that is basically having a lot of protection measures and in the construction methods to limit ground movement to minimize any damages to the surrounding building, especially heritage buildings. probably that's what I can share in this short amount of time.
Maybe Florian, I can just add that
please.
one of my first projects as a young ARUP employee was a tunnel under a city in the UK. And all of those issues were part of my day job. So fascinating experience.
Are you going to share a screen or?
No, just saying.
Okay. Okay, so then I would, I think I asked the last question, and I think this is for both of you. Maybe Neil, you can start with it. There was a question about the last mile, I would say, because I think this was also raised earlier. So could we promote bikes to replace motorbikes, and how could we do that? So, because I mean, we have a lot of motorized motorbike travel, and you said earlier, Neil, that this the answer of to a problem in a way. And could we also promote e-bikes to replace the motorbikes, especially in Indonesia, in the urban areas? Will it reduce pollution? Of course, yes, it will reduce pollution in terms of CO2, but maybe this question goes also end of life and battery recycling and so on and so forth. So what is your opinion on that one?
Yeah, sure. E-bikes is the fastest growing transport sector in the world right now, and accelerated more by COVID. It's something we're looking at under the New Capital Project as part of the master planning work, and it's fundamentally it's about making people who would not normally choose to ride a traditional cycle to addressing the problems that would discourage them from otherwise using it, which is typically gradients and temperature or humidity, the perception of it being an unpleasant exercise type of transport. How do you do it? I think it's about generating awareness, generating confidence to give it a try, creating high quality, continuous, protected infrastructure. The key to cycling in cities is continuous and protected. If it's bits of infrastructure, you get bits of users. If you make a continuous protected network, you will get a comprehensive shift in transport mindset. One of the comments in my breakout group was about how Amsterdam is a world model for cycling, and how Paris has started that journey, Brussels has started that journey, London has started that journey. What people don't remember is that Amsterdam used to be just the same as Paris and London and Brussels, and they only have what they have today because they went on that journey. They've been on that journey for a very long time. They take out, I think, 3% of their car parking every year. Nobody notices. But you've got to do these things gradually over time. Create comprehensive, complete infrastructure. And then people will use bikes and e-bikes.
But I would like to add something there too, and ask both of you to add up, because I mean, you live in Singapore, and Silvia has lived in Singapore, and there are similar initiatives there for bringing people on bikes. And one advantage, of course, in Amsterdam and in France, it's not as hot and humid. I mean, of course, it rains, but cold rain you can handle and deal with. But you know, if you go in the morning to work and you're completely sweaty after you rode for 10 minutes on a bike to your station, there needs to be, I think, a little bit more tropical appropriate solution, maybe in form of a Salazar network, you know, a covered walkway, a roofway or something, not only continuous. Do you have any plans or ideas about that? To ease the last mile?
Yeah, to share a Sydney story. So the trip end facilities in the city of Sydney, I'm not sure what the organisation is called, but the people who are in charge of planning approvals in Sydney increased the minimum requirement for cycle trip end facilities to lockers and showers and et cetera. And they thought it might be difficult, and the development sector absolutely embraced it very quickly. So it's about demonstrating that leadership and demonstrating that the minimum acceptable standard. If it's higher and that becomes the benchmark that the customers will buy, then you get a change in behavior. The Singapore context for me With e-bikes, all of that disappears because the sweaty cyclist becomes a person sitting on a vehicle using the convection cooling system by just sitting on the bike and being taken through the naturally generated breeze. We're going forwards at 20 k's an hour. It's like being in a breeze at 20 k's, right? E-bikes fixes that problem.
Okay, good. Silvia, would you have some answers for Jakarta in terms of the last mile?
Yeah, so I think this last mile is something that currently also Jakarta is implementing. The government are really now is very on in promoting cycling. And in fact, the central government, the Ministry of Transport have issued an almost like an instruction, I believe, regulations whereby that all public transport facilities and buildings even have to provide bike rack and shower facilities. Yeah, so that this is to bolster, to push the usage of cycling as the first and the last mile mode of commuting, from public transport to their final destination. So yeah, this is something that is now happening in Jakarta, and of course, like just now what Neil shared, to really make it successful as become a choice, that we simply have to make it more convenience, providing lockers and shower locations, even probably at stations and the surrounding buildings.
Thank you very much. That's very interesting. I mean, thinking about showers and so on and so forth. So it could be even a new business, popping up, some form of shower station or bike.
Exactly.
Put the bike there and I walk through like a car wash and I'm showered or something. I mean, very interesting. So thank you very much, everybody, for your fantastic presentations and lectures. I have to round it up now. I must say I learned a lot, tremendously a lot today. It was very interesting. I'm very fascinated. And I think within this topic of mobility, we covered a lot of aspects and a lot of fields. And just to recap it a little bit in terms of what needs to happen in Jakarta in order that an MRT LRT system is successful. It needs to prove in a way that it is more ease to use, more comfortable than using a car. And there are several ideas or several measures in place. So basically, the ease of use is how to get there. We talked about it now with the bikes in the end, but also because people using more modes of transportation, how to switch easily from one system to the other. And that not only physical in terms of walking, and everybody knows the metro in the subway in London, where you walk up and down underground. So maybe we could avoid something like this a little bit in Jakarta and make it maybe more accessible, also accessible for elderly people. But also what you mentioned is the ease of payment, right? So, comfortable payment method. So the unified payment method seems to be also important for that. What else? What else did I write down? I think that's it so far. Yes. Transforming Jakarta into a more livable city is also the broader goal, and public transportation is one part of that. So once more, I would like to thank everybody for their contribution. The speakers, Ibu Silvia, Neil, and the commentators, Pa Tiyok and Pa Widoyoko. So thank you very much for your great presentations. And I hand over now the microphone for closing comments by the organizing committee of IDN Liveable Cities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Florian, and thank you very much, everyone, all the speakers. We really appreciate that. Neil, this is super late for you in Singapore, and Ibu Silvia, you stay all the way. We really appreciate it. But also, of course, Pak Widoyoko and Pak Tiyok Prasetyoadi. We really value your participation and your comments and everyone's comments. And there are so many questions that cannot be answered, even though we have extended the discussion time more than the first webinar. But maybe there is a chance for you to get your questions answered in a later phase. And of course, to our dear sponsors, the Ministry of Tourism and Creative Economy, thank you so much for helping us, supporting us. And to PT Propan Raya, Pak Yuwono, thank you so much. And of course, ATEJA, Pak Richard and the team, thank you so much for your support. And of course, IDN, the Netherlands. And of course, we've been waiting for this moment, who gets the books? And these are, number one, Pak Sawarendro. Congratulations, Pak Sawarendro.
Thank you, Bo.
Fantastic. We'll get your book shipped. The organizer will make sure that happens. Pak Jevon Wicaksono. That is for you. There will be one book, a random assignment, and sent to your doorstep. And last but not least, Pak Harwianto, I think in Malang. And congratulations to all of you, and hope these books are arriving to you very soon.
Thank you.
And for our internal review, please help us to fill the questionnaire below. So there will be a pop-up in the chat for the feedback. We really look forward to your feedback so we can learn. And of course, this is an announcement for everyone. Together with the Embassy of Denmark, co-organizing together with us the third webinar. Please, everyone should join. There will be fantastic speakers from Kai-Uwe Bergman, Big New York, and Peter Mindhausen from Urban Rigor, Pak Lutfi Eko Nugroho from Bapeda Semarang, hosted by our very own Wiwi Tiyok. She's fantastic. And one of the commentators will be Pak Sony Sutanto, and we will unleash more information in the coming days, but you can already click the registration form, and it will also be in the chat box. So please do register. It's going to be fantastic. And thank you so much, everyone. Have a nice evening, and we will leave the room one by one, but there will be some promotional video from Propan and ATEJA, and we wish you a very fantastic evening. Thank you very much, everyone.